Today, a changing of the guard. Is HuffPo dead or reborn?
Then we begin to look back at the election and what it means going forward.
And speaking of forward, a look to 2025. It's closer than you think.
I'm Alexia Scordato, and this is Future Forward.
I am Steven Rosenbaum. Let us launch. Good morning, Alexa.
Good morning, Steve.
You know, I have to say I'm enjoying this show now that we're not having to do politics so relentlessly. It's like a little deep breath. It's been a couple of weeks. The world's returning to normal. I'm not doom scrolling my phone in the middle of the night so much.
Yeah, although the transition is worrying me, but that's we don't have to get into that.
Yeah, we'll save that. We'll save that for yet another day. So we're going to do 3 chapters in today's show, and I think we should just start right in with Buzzfeed because it not only is it relevant and getting some interesting coverage, but I think it's a good window into the world that you and I came from and kind of this endless consolidation. Maybe should we start with the journal piece just because, well, I don't know. Like let's start with the Verizon the Verge piece because it's written in a way that is helpful and a little snarky. So I'll read you the first paragraph and then we can dive in. So BuzzFeed and HuffPo, formerly separate, are now one, says The Verge, as first reported in the Wall Street Journal. Verizon, which previously owned HuffPo, also known as the Huffington Post, has dumped the powerhouse digital media brand in an all-stock deal. So that's just 2 sentences, and I already question powerhouse media brand.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's really dominant anymore, but it has household name recognition, right? There's brand equity there. It's not like you would go to a dinner party and say, and people wouldn't know what it is.
Yeah, but you could say the same thing of Friendster too. Maybe not. Maybe not.
Yeah.
All right. So here's like a reminder for our listeners who are not, over the age of 30 or 35. Huffington Post made its bones as a political site, and it was a massively successful Democratic left-leaning political site. It was in its day. That was what, it was the MSNBC of its time.
Every single time people slam the media for not using words like Trump lied, and they say, let me rewrite the headline for you. Like when you see tweets saying, I'm rewriting this headline, I always, in my head, think of what would have the HuffPo headline been? Like the big blue Helvetica-like font slamming the administration.
And those headlines were, in no small part, the responsibility of Jonah Peretti. What people may remember is that, in the early days of HuffPo, its innovation was that it would rapidly test multiple headlines of stories and then some combination of algorithm and human effort say, wait, we have these 10 different headlines for the same story, and that one's performing like crazy. Put that one up, and the other 4 would go down. And so it became, a little tabloidish, certainly, but it was, and a spirit of full disclosure, I wrote for Huffington Post for a very long time and was very proud of it, loved the work I did for them, and got a lot of attention for it. So those were most certainly the good old days.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was acquired as part of this series of acquisitions. The thing that's worth remembering is that Tim Armstrong, all right, remember that name?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, so that's like name check Tim Armstrong. Tim Armstrong had this strategy that he was going to be the player in the web and was going to essentially scoop up everything he possibly could. And at AOL, and bought a whole series of sites, including Huffington Post.
Yep.
I'm leaving silence there because, that story has the ending is, then there was, we'll never really know, but there was some internal Verizon power play, and there was two strategies, and one was we're going to be an infrastructure company, and one was we're going to be a content company, and Tim lost. And Tim has not been heard from since. I mean, I could Google him. I'm sure he's somewhere. But and so now you've got all these assets, like really good early web assets sitting at Verizon that are essentially like on a ghost ship. So like TechCrunch,
right.
and Huffington Post and a bunch of others, and the thing, of course, is that they're all perfectly fine web properties, but they're a rounding error number for Verizon.
Yep.
So they've been for sale for a while.
Yeah, and Verizon, I guess last year, it's been a year now, Verizon shed Tumblr. Right? Automatic, the creators of WordPress, bought it from Verizon. So it's not surprising that they would also let go of HuffPo, because I feel like that strategy they abandoned a long time ago.
So does this ever work? Do old media brands that get cut from the mothership and set off to drift with a low value acquirer, low cost of acquirer, do they ever see their heyday again?
Not necessarily. I can't think of one in the sort of media conglomerate parent company sense, but we have seen digital transformation when it comes to media properties themselves. Like the New York Times is a good example of that. The New York Times, a decade ago was trading at like $3.50 a share and was probably considered to be a dying brand. But then they doubled down on digital, and I play the New York Times crossword puzzle on my phone now. It's totally different. But they did that on their own.
So maybe there's a better question to ask, and you'll know this better than I, but like HuffPo notwithstanding, is BuzzFeed doing okay?
I mean, I think they're doing fine. I think what's tough about BuzzFeed is the product of their editorial has really shifted over the years. Like BuzzFeed's like entry into the media landscape for me was at least like memes and listicles, right? Like quizzes, which Disney character top 10 most popular Thanksgiving sides that you want to have on your table this year. And then they added a news component. So it's actually tough to even think about what does success mean for BuzzFeed. Is it a ton of affiliate like links where they're monetizing that way? Is it an advertising like publisher model? Do they want to be seen as serious editorial news, or they just want to sort of be seen as like a fun website?
Yeah, they don't show up in my feed ever anymore, and I don't know why that is.
Sometimes like some of their like really hardcore news pieces I see get picked up.
So we tried to look at HuffPost, so all this reporting says powerhouse HuffPost. So we spent a little bit of time poking around trying to figure out if the traffic was actually that interesting. And we got, traffic on the web is a complicated thing, but we got essentially two numbers, right? So we got like a 8 million uniques and then an 85 million uniques. And it depends on whether you queue up all of the regional Buzzfeed.ca and all those.
Yeah, we'll say though that according to SimilarWeb, we're looking at about 85 million visits.
And if we go back to 2015, there's a Fortune article, maybe Forbes, that essentially says they were modestly bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
So they're flat.
Stagnant.
So here's the important thing, and then we can kind of dig into the next chapter in the news conversation. It's worth knowing that if you actually pay attention to the transaction, that BuzzFeed didn't buy Huffington Post. That what's reported in the third graph of these articles is Verizon took a minority stake in Huffington Post. And as part of the investment, they put in some money, undetermined amount, and gave BuzzFeed Huffington Post as part of a non-cash of an equity transaction. That's very different.
Right.
That's the equivalent. It's the difference between me saying to you, "Hey Alexa, I've got this beautiful puppy. He's really wonderful. Would you like to buy him?" And you say, "I'll pay $300." And me saying, "Hey Alexa, I've got this puppy. I really can't take care of it. Would you take my puppy from me? And by the way, I'll give you the dog food, and I'll give you all of the collar, and I'll give you the tracking chip." And like, that's
Right.
it's a different puppy.
It's a different puppy. I'm still, there's still a transaction where I'm taking responsibility for the puppy, but the value exchange is completely different.
Right.
One scenario, the onus is on me to really fork up the investment. The other, it's actually like less lucrative on the part of you, the seller.
And just to use the puppy analogy for a little bit longer, if you've got kids and you don't want to say to the kids, "Hey, we're taking this puppy to the adoption shelter," because that would be painful and horrible. You want to say to the kids, "We're taking this puppy and giving it to our friend Alexa, and what she does with said puppy, we won't know." So I do think that to some extent, Verizon just doesn't want to be seen as taking Huffington Post off to the shelter. Like,
right.
They don't, whatever the downsizing and consolidation and cost cutting and rebranding is going to be, they don't want it to happen on their watch.
Yep.
So there's been a lot of this, right? I mean, a lot of these big frothy web properties have sold, merged. Bustle, I think, was an acquirer of a bunch of low price assets. I think it's fair to say that the lack of a vibrant economy around these diverse voices is a bad thing.
It's horrible. Yeah, it's sad, and it's not sustainable.
And is that just Google and Facebook just sucking up all the air in the room? Yeah, probably.
10,000%, yes. Like, unlike streaming subscriptions, right? You can say Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus. Each of those streaming media entities can go out to consumers and say, "Hey, pay us whatever, $4.99 a month, pay us $9.99 a month." And consumers are clearly opting into that. All of the web-based properties like HuffPo, or like you said, Bustle, like, I don't know how HuffPo actually convinces me as a reader to subscribe to them, especially when you think about, I don't know, just the number of news sources that you can get, right? You're already subscribing to, say, like, I subscribe to the New York Times and Atlantic and Washington Post. Like, I don't know how much room I have for others.
So Huffington Post got a new editor-in-chief 2 years ago, made a big announcement that they were changing their name from Huffington Post to HuffPo, and that they were no longer going to be left-leaning. In fact, they were going to go out and make a real effort to connect with Trump readers. She's now gone, which I did not know. And I think it's fair to say that that was an abysmal failure.
10,000%. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. By the way, somebody texted me the link to Tim Armstrong's Wikipedia page. So I'll just read you the latest. In 2017, Armstrong and Billy Joe Armstrong, together with Tim's nephew, Ray Armstrong, and Billy Joe's son, Joey Armstrong formed the band the Armstrongs and released their first single, If There Was Ever a Time.
What? Are they going to perform their first concert on the moon as a tribute to Lance Armstrong?
If we had a producer for this podcast, they would be scrambling to play a clip of the hit song from the Armstrongs right now. But unfortunately, it's just us. So we'll have to find that clip and share it with you in the show notes.
Next week, for sure.
Oh my God, I don't even know what to say about
so
that.
So what's your is this where's HuffPo in 5 years? Dead or alive?
Well, the question's different than that. The actual question is, where's BuzzFeed in how many years? 2?
5. But you could say 2.
I think it comes down to the equity. I think the question is, so Jonah's been talking about HuffPo, about BuzzFeed being profitable for as long as I can remember. And there was something in the coverage that said that Jonah said it would be profitable by 2020. Well, that would be now, right? This moment. I think that, all of these things come down to, you've got investors, you've got a board of directors, they've got money in, they'd like the money out. There's only so many ways you get out when you're at the scale they're at. One is an IPO. Does BuzzFeed have an IPO in its future? Crystal Ball says no. So no IPO, which means it needs to be acquired either at a loss or flat or at a profit or merged into something. Jonah's hardworking and driven, but he's the victim of what's going on in the content space broadly, and I'm not sure that he gets to control that. It's easy to be negative. Negative is easy. I'm having, I would like to say something optimistic here, but I'm not sure what there is to say.
Well, the world has a bunch of billionaires. Maybe they'll find like a billionaire benefactor in the way that Bezos took Washington Post, Mark Benioff took Time.
Yeah, but those were like, trophy wife acquisitions.
Right.
I'm not sure that BuzzFeed or Huffington Post are trophies for, I think they both were acquired with a mission. I don't know. I think if you get outside our little bubble, our listener bubble, and you ask average consumers what they remember about either they would say BuzzFeed listicles, and they would say Huffington Post politics.
Yep.
And in some ways, the slightly frothy, trivial, poppy BuzzFeed early 1.0 energy has moved over to TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
It's slightly like, junk food. It was, sorry. I know some of my friends who are writers in many seasons of BuzzFeed's ecosystem are going to be angry at me for that. But in its earliest days, that's what it was. All right. Anyway, so that brings us to Professor G. So you dug up a newsletter piece that is kind of future of news. That, to be fair, I'd read it as well. The Scott Galloway piece about CNN.
Mm-hmm.
You go first.
So, he opens and he does talk about how he met with the New York Times many, many years ago. And they sort of went through what the New York Times is going to need in order to succeed, right? Basically, investing in verticals like games, health, travel, really doubling down on digital, making sure that mobile or responsive web and the subscription really made sense. And so they've been on a journey, the New York Times. And so Scott was just pontificating on what is the future of Twitter and CNN. When it comes to CNN and broadcast, what does that look like? I mean, there's so many ways to kind of pick this apart, but I just thought it was so rich and dense in terms of looking at the media landscape. And I think my biggest takeaway from it is that it's almost like the markets themselves, like distribution versus content, right, have almost just merged, and it's really hard to decouple them anymore. So anyway, that's sort of what my brain was thinking a lot about as a result of this, and then also the Verizon Huffington Post news.
So I debated telling this story. I've never told it publicly, but I'll tell it to you. So many years ago, I was running a company called Broadcast News Networks, and that was a news distribution cable production company. And a friend of mine was then running CNN US. And I'll never forget this. He called me and he said, "I need your advice." And I said, "Sure." And he said, "My boss keeps putting the Fox News ratings reports on my desk and wants to know what we can do to compete with them. What should I do?" And I paused for longer than I usually do. And I took a deep breath and I said, "Write your resignation letter." And he said, "I don't understand." And I said, "It would be like a fine dining restaurant being told by their boss, 'Hey, look at how many hamburgers McDonald's selling. Those are the numbers we need to they're." And I said this back then. I said, "Fox News doesn't play by news rules. They're not fair. They're not balanced. They're an entertainment network, and you're being asked to run a news network, but be competitive to an entertainment network." I said, it's a failed analysis, and you will fail at it, and CNN will fail at it. And so what worries me about the Galloway evaluation here is that he thinks that a deep pocket, rescuer can come in and somehow scoop up CNN and make it a credible news source. I think that as long as the measurements are what they are, and as long as you're being measured on eyeballs and viewing time and all that kind of mechanism, CNN has to be some version of a sideshow. And, the people with the right pictures are going to win, and the people with the most salacious hosts are going to win. And I don't know, the other example of this is if you go back to, the last attempt to do kind of a left-leaning or balanced or whatever it was, I guess it was left-leaning at the time, media company was Air America. And, Air America also failed, and it failed because, news is just not that funny, and it's not that entertaining. I mean, and
right.
So
if you scroll down to in this newsletter blog post, right, he merges Twitter and CNN logo into TNN, and I think that's some kind of the point, right? If you look at Twitter adoption and demographics, and then you look at CNN viewership, they're kind of like inverted. And so you think about from a asset and value standpoint, what actually happens when instead of Twitter fake news doom scrolling, right? You sort of get the entertainment of politics without the news integrity. And then you take sort of the fact first investigative journalism punditry of CNN, and you put them together. All of a sudden, CNN has sort of a revitalized distribution channel, and then Twitter actually has sort of an editorial focus that it doesn't have now. I don't know how that gets pulled off, and I think it might alienate CNN viewers, and it might alienate Twitter power users, but it's super interesting to just think about.
Look, Scott's really good at this, right? let's take Walmart and merge it with, pay less shoes. I mean, this is a thing he does with great skill, which is kind of these big, slightly kooky but reasonable mergers. But what's going to come down to is shareholder value, and the shareholders of Twitter and the shareholders of CNN, and the fact that Warner Media wants out of. I mean, part of this comes from Warner Media has said, we want out of CNN.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, another thing just to remember about the news business is no advertiser ever has said to their agency, hey, take our messaging, take our ads or our taglines and put them next to that terrible forest fire or that murder or that rape or that COVID reporting. Like, news is not inherently something advertisers want to be near.
Right.
Which is why, if you look at the New York Times, part of their success is the crossword puzzle, and part of their success is food, and part of their success is real estate. I mean, they understood that the lifestyle pieces of that institution would build the news will build audience and subscribers and revenue, but it's not going to build advertiser opportunities. So,
I think he didn't mention it, but I mean, this isn't necessarily a new idea. Twitter has Cheddar News, which I think was actually created by someone who is involved in Buzzfeed, or maybe co-created Buzzfeed.
No. Cheddar isn't owned by Twitter.
No. I'm saying they Twitter and Cheddar, like Cheddar broadcasts on Twitter.
Yeah.
Like there's already Twitter has already explored, oh, do people want to actually consume live video on Twitter? Right. And they've done that partnership with Cheddar. And so I don't even know what their appetite would be for like CNN's broadcasting journalism more integrated into their platform. Although I don't know. We have to do a different thing on Flock because I don't get it either. So I don't understand a lot of the decisions Twitter's making, but
wow,
But anyway,
I believe Jack has left the building and replaced Jack with Jackbot. All right, so we have two other little chapters, so we're going to run a little long today, but it's worth it. So let's jump over to this Neiman Lab piece, which I thought was strangely and wonderfully soothing. Like, rarely have I read a long read that I could just really settle into. So this is an article about from 100+ scholars on what we learned from the 2020 election.
Mm-hmm.
There's no thesis. There's lots of different points of view. It's 80+ pieces, which means it's almost too large to be read. But I'm working my way through it. But it was it was the opposite of the CNN Fox News Scream Fest. It was thoughtful and provocative, and
what I like about it is it almost is like a fast forward. Like for me, I was thinking, oh, what are my kids gonna learn about this time in history if they were to take a journalism class, right, in 50 years? And it's thematically sort of the way this article is written. It's almost the chapters of like your required reading, like your foundational class on news, media, election, and the 2020 politics. If you were to imagine a college course like that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So that's why I liked it. I was like, oh, it gave me this appreciation for like what really is the narrative, like objectively, around why today's events matter in the arc of history.
I would say it would be really valuable if you were going to a cocktail party in January and you wanted to be able to talk about the election intelligently, but since we're not going to the cocktail party.
Hey, there's Zoom cocktail parties. We should host one.
I've never done one. Do people actually drink?
I think so. You can just a beverage of your choice.
Yeah. Never have I understood the value of the bar environment more than I have, in the last 6 months. Like, I just want to go to a bar and drink through a straw that goes through a little hole in my mask. I don't even know how that works. All right, so maybe that's enough said about the Neiman Lab piece, except that it's great and highly recommend, and would be interested in feedback from our listener viewers as to what they think about it. Which article? I mean, we probably need to curate it and say, here are the top 5, because otherwise I don't know how you get through it. But 2020, it was only 2 weeks ago, and the election is, by some definition, not resolved yet, although that's another topic that we'll skip for today. All right. So now for our last chapter, let's go to 2025. This is a World Economic Forum article, and this is basically 17 ways technology could change the world by 2025. Really, also like this a lot. So let's just run through them, and then you stop me if any of them seem not obvious or you don't agree with them. So number 1 is AI optimized manufacturing.
Makes sense, right? We already optimized supply chain with it.
A million years ago, I saw a car. I was inside a plant of robots building car parts, and it was hypnotic then, and I assume it's gotten dramatically better. 2, far-reaching energy transformation.
This felt really optimistic, but that's just because it requires a coordinated effort. And right now in the US, our commitment towards energy transformation, at least in the current soon to be out administration, has not been great. But I want this to be true.
Yeah, I think you're going to see dramatic steps forward quickly under Biden. 3, I guess I didn't fully understand, a new era of computing. And I guess they're talking about quantum computing kind of coming into its own. No one's written these words yet that I've read. I'm sure if I Google them, I'd find them. But presumably what we're going to find out about the coronavirus vaccine and the reason it's been developed by multiple organizations with similarity and speed in a way that has never been done before in human history is because of the power of quantum computing.
Right. You have multiple data sources, and the analysis of that data is only made possible as a result of computing power. Maybe not even necessarily quantum computing power, but just computing power.
So it's not the scientists worked extra hard. It's that the data
they're working their asses off, but for sure.
Oh, no.
They made it possible. Yeah.
It's the reason why you can't beat a chess playing computer.
Yeah.
Because they can just play more moves. I just called it they. All right. Sorry. All right. Number 4, we should move fast because there's 17 of them. Healthcare paradigm will shift to prevention through diet.
I'm skeptical about this one. I just think people's behavioral patterns are kind of hard to transform.
5G will enhance the global economy and save lives.
Maybe. I hope
so. 6, a new normal in managing cancer.
I thought this was interesting. I guess it felt like it was really broad. I don't know. Could you think of an example that feels tangible?
Well, they said, it's interesting that they said managing rather than curing.
Right.
But 2025 is really soon, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's 4 years from now. Robotic retail.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess this is basically saying you'll have robots shopping for you at the grocery stores. I mean, robots basically take stuff off shelves in Amazon now, so it's kind of happening. I guess I just don't know if people want it. How popular are some of these things?
So I ventured out to Zabar's the other day, and there was a guy at the cheese counter next to me ordering, and he was clearly from Instacart. And he had the phone in his hand, and he was talking to the woman behind the cheese counter, trying to translate cheese questions that he clearly didn't understand to a woman who clearly didn't understand the Instacart guy's cheese needs.
Yeah.
And I thought it's going to be a long time before a robot replaces the slightly quizzical Instacart guy.
Also, as someone who misses the Upper West Side, I would love to go to Zabar's post-pandemic, and just for like the smell and the looking at the choices, like I love that. I don't
Are you
want that.
suggesting that during the pandemic I took great risks to go to get deli food?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had a mask and gloves and a hat, but I still did stand in the deli line, which is 6 feet social distanced and all that stuff. And all the people behind the counters are wearing masks. I mean, I think they handle anyway. All right, we have a couple more. A blurring of physical and virtual space.
Yep.
Putting individuals, not institutions, at the heart of healthcare. That's a long conversation.
That's a really, yeah.
The future of construction has already begun. Well, yeah, robots are going to build things. Okay, fine. Gigaton scale CO2 removal will help reverse climate change.
Hope so. I don't know anything about the technology there, but yes, if we can clean the air, for sure.
12, a new era in medicine. Oh, that's what we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
13, closing the wealth gap.
Oh gosh, I hope so, but a lot of things have to happen in order for this. Like anything that's policy driven on this list, I'm so skeptical about.
Yeah, well, consider the source, World Economic Forum.
Right. Yeah.
14, a clean energy revolution supported by digital twins.
Yeah. I don't know. Really,
I don't know what that means. I mean, I have to read deeper to understand what a digital twin is. All right, 3 more. Understanding microscopic secrets hidden on surfaces.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, even with coronavirus, there's been a lot of work in that area.
All right, 16, machine learning and AI expedite decarbonization in carbon-heavy industries.
This for me is like related to the
CO2, yeah.
Yeah.
And then number 17, privacy is pervasive and prioritized.
I think we're turning the corner here. At least we're a fork in the road. Obviously, a company like Apple taking a hard, firm stance on privacy is not trivial. And I think we're going to see more and more consumers shift market standards when it comes to privacy.
Yeah, and California's little known but often talked about on this pod, Proposition 24 is going to roll through the U.S. ad market. All right, so with that, cleansing deep breath. Any big Thanksgiving plans? Anything exciting?
We're doing like distributed, decoupled Thanksgiving, no large gatherings for the first time. I'm going to see my parents, but only conditional on me having a negative COVID test. You know, we're keeping it really small and safe. Did
you see that there is now an at-home COVID test that's been approved by the FDA 2 days ago?
No, that's great news.
Yeah. How
much is it?
I don't know the answer to that. And also you need a prescription to get it.
Oh,
and although, presumably we all have doctors that will write, it's not a hard prescription to ask for, but so we made the decision to do no gathering. Everyone in the family is kind of working at their own small little Thanksgiving plan. We tried to order the Fresh Direct 2-person turkey Thanksgiving thing. We tried for days and they kept going out of stock before we could get it in our shopping cart. So finally we just went to Gristedes and got a little turkey, and we're going to have a little mini meal, like cook at home. But
and that's what all the cool kids are doing, Steve.
Well, that would be me. That would be me, the cool kid.
That's what we have to do. That's how we're going to beat this thing.
And by the way, we didn't even talk about it, but continued good news, on the COVID. Are we saying cure? We're not saying cure.
Vaccine.
which
you should read the latest article though on what the Pfizer drug is going to take in order to administer. It's like 2 doses, 28 days apart, and the infrastructure needs to be built now across the country in order to store it, because it has to be stored at a certain temperature. It's very complex.
Okay, so just to play dummy for a second, why don't we just say we had a competition, Moderna won. We're not going to build all this infrastructure. We're going to put all our money into Moderna because you don't have to have that, because that can sit in a fridge. Why are we doing both?
Because we're capitalists, Steve, and we
Yeah.
want choice and free markets. And what about public health crises? No, this is about Moderna and Pfizer are going to duke it out and raise shareholder value.
Oh, it makes me so sad that you're right. All right. All right. With that, we are out of time. We'll see you next week. Have a nice Thanksgiving. Bye.